One more time, casual conversational cartoon curriculum, very concise and relatively correct, as simple as possible, as soon as possible, A&P. We're going over chapter 5. Here's our second general installment right here. We were talking about epithelial tissue. We had talked about what a tissue is, its cells and cell products. We talked about the relative number of cells inside your body. We had talked about where epithelial tissue is found on natural surfaces as coverings or linings. We also said it's part of glands. We talked about basic features such as high cellularity, very little interstitial space and fluid. We talked about the three surfaces, free or apical, lateral, and basal. We talked about the position and significance of the basement membrane, what it has to do with the relative health of cells as they get farther from the basement membrane. Gave you some bizarro examples over here with the epidermis, and finished up by saying something about P-safer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 general functions of the epithelial tissue. Now let's go for what I call the great epithelial wall right here. A gross oversimplification of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of epithelia. We'll start off with the shapes of the cells. Now we tend to think of the cells from a lateral view, from a side view, as being some kind of a box. However, from an apical view, very often these cells have a hexagonal shape to them, or perhaps five-sided, but hexagonal seems to be a very common shape. So, looking from the side of a slide, you might see a box, but from the top, you might see something that's more of a hexagon. We identify epithelial tissues according to the number of cells it takes to go from the basement membrane to the free surface, and by the relative shape of these cells at the free surface. So we use simple to mean one cell layer and stratified to mean two or more cell layers. We use the word squamous to refer to a cell that's flattened out, that's wider than it's tall, cuboidal to represent a cell that is as wide as it is tall, and columnar for a cell that is taller than it is wide. So here are the basic types of epithelial tissues. There's simple squamous, a single layer of flattened cells. And you would find this someplace where you wanted materials to be exchanged across this fence right here. It is the thinnest possible barrier between two areas. So we'll see this, say, in capillaries and in the alveoli of the bronchial tree. Simple cuboidal. These things are as wide as they are tall. In simple squamous, the nuclei tend to be flattened out. In simple cuboidal, the nuclei tend to be round and spherical because there's more shape to the thing. These are commonly found in areas where a duct is just a pipe that's going to drain something from the area, or sometimes more complicated than that. Let's get more complicated. Simple columnar. These are taller than they're wide. The nuclei very often are almond-shaped, but not always. There's many different types of simple columnar epithelial tissues. One might have microvilli on it, as we mentioned way back in chapter 4. This will be found in places where you want to absorb materials, such as the small intestine, inner lining of the small intestine. Now, this is simple because a cell can go from the basement membrane to the free surface. Oh, by the way, also in simple columnar, very often there's goblet cells. These things produce mucus. More about that in a second. Now, over here we have an example of a simple columnar tissue that doesn't look simple. In this situation right here, we can find a cell that goes from the bottom basement membrane to the top, the apical surface. Therefore, this tissue is simple by definition. However, it looks like it's layered. It looks like there's a bottom layer of nuclei and a top layer of nuclei, as if there were at least two layers of cells. So it's commonly called pseudo-stratified, fake stratified. It is simple columnar, but it's called pseudo-stratified because of the general appearance. Now, sometimes these things are ciliated. Again, this is very common to find lining the trachea. Goblet cells, again, we mentioned these structures right here. Somebody thought they looked like a wine goblet, a glass. They produce a material called mucus, M-U-C-U-S. The cell has the adjective M-U-C-O-U-S. So M-U-C-O-U-S is an adjective to say something associated with the noun, which is M-U-C-U-S. So mucus is the slimy material that's pumped out. Mucus right here is the adjective describing a mucus cell, a mucous membrane, something along that line. And the slimy mucus is made up of a protein plus water, and the protein is called mucin. So mucin is the protein. You combine it with water, you make mucus, the slimy stuff, and whatever is associated with it has the adjective mucous associated with that too. This right here represents a cartoon of stratified squamous in which cells at the bottom are reproducing and pushing copies up towards the surface. And as the cells go up towards the surface, they die because they're getting farther and farther away from the basement membrane, from the capillaries that are below the basement membrane. Now, you may have cuboidal cells towards the bottom, but this thing is identified according to the apical surface. So at the apical surface, the cells have died and flattened out. Therefore, it's called stratified squamous. There's another type of tissue called transitional. In transitional, the thing is stratified, but there is no consistent cell shape. Instead, there's just piles of oddly shaped cells attached to each other. Now, what's unique about transitional epithelium is the fact that if this tissue were stretched, it would still maintain a barrier, but the cells would change their shape dramatically. This is something that happens in the lining of structures such as the urinary bladder, which can go from a small shape to a large shape, as you accumulate more and more urine, but it doesn't break the surface. Here are some very common places where you expect to find some of these tissue types. In the back of the nasal cavity, let this be the respiratory system, in the back of the nasal cavity, pseudo-stratified tissue. Probably stratified, pseudo-stratified. Excuse me, wrong. Ciliated pseudo-stratified. In the area of the throat and the mouth right here, where it gets really, really rough, it'd be just stratified squamous. Down inside the trachea, pseudo-stratified again. If you move out to the bronchi, the inner lining becomes simple columnar. Get farther into the bronchioles, becomes simple cuboidal. And when you finally get to the alveoli at the end, the little sacs at the end, it's simple squamous, the thinnest possible barrier between two environments, air inside and what's going to be blood on the outside. Let's look at the digestive system. In the digestive system, you have stratified squamous epithelium in the mouth, pharynx, and esophagus, where things are rough. But when you cross into the stomach, small intestine, and large intestine, the inner lining becomes simple columnar. Simple columnar provides extra room for chemical processing going on, not just protection like this, but now there's room for chemical processing and absorption and transferring things from one environment to another. At the end of the digestive system, however, in the rectum, it goes back to being stratified squamous because life gets rough down there. Inside your kidneys, the smallest structures that are creating the urine are called nephrons. And they start off with simple squamous, the thinnest possible surface to allow things to cross. But then it has tubes that are simple cuboidal, again, just ductwork to move the fluid away. And as you move away from the kidneys down toward the urinary bladder, you see transitional epithelium in the ureters right here and inside the bladder, again, allowing them to expand as urine volume goes up. But at the end, stratified squamous as it connects to the rough outside world. A distinction to be made here between keratinized and non-keratinized stratified squamous. Now, keratin is the name of the tough waterproofing protein that's found inside that stratified squamous epithelium. It's tough, it's waterproofing. And on the dry surface of your body, it is keratinized stratified squamous, keeping the water in and also keeping water out. So that on a rainy day, you don't have to worry about absorbing that, but also on a sunny day, you don't have to worry about evaporating your waterway too quickly. Now, the entrance to and the exit from the digestive system is stratified squamous, but it's non-keratinized. The transition up here is between your skin, your lips, and then the inside your mouth. Your lips show you that it's stratified squamous because when they chap, they come off in flakes. And you can see it's going from keratinized to non-keratinized because it's losing its waterproofing ability, which is one reason why your lips dry out when you're in a dry environment. Why you put chapstick on, again, an artificial sealant for that. So inside the mouth right there, stratified squamous, but non-keratinized. So you scrape a Q-tip on the surface of your dry skin, nothing really comes off. Scrape it on the inside of your mouth, you get a slimy little patch of skin cells. But down here also in the rectum, the last part, the anal canal, it's stratified squamous, non-keratinized, but where it connects to the outside skin, it becomes keratinized one more time.